everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Bold and the Brave, a Parent Leader podcast. My name is Melvette Hill, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Zulema Gomez. Welcome back, everyone. Hello, Zulema.
Hi.
It's so good to be here. And spring is springing.
Oh my goodness, finally, there's some sun in California. Feeling good.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I love that we are matching today. We both are rocking our black and white. What does that say? I just said spring is springing, but then we both have on black and white. But it is. We're springing. And so is my hair. My curls are springing. If you all could see me, for those of you who are listening, I have my little curly curls today. And Zulema's hair is like slick and short and chic. Yes, you're rocking it out today.
So what's new with you, Melvette?
Lots of things. Here in Connecticut, we are wrapping up our legislative session next week. So things are moving slow and fast at the same time. And that's what's new. That's all I have to report. It's not raining here, which is great. It's sunny in Connecticut today. What's new with you?
Wrapping up the school year in another month. So that's exciting for all of us at home. And then some work travel in DC in May that I'm really looking forward to. And some fun. Definitely adding some fun time. So that'll be great.
Yes. Fun is good. You have to make sure that you take plenty of pictures, and also please and thank you, make sure you put some photos on your Instagram and maybe do some TikTok, because inquiring minds want to know how you are living life and having fun out there.
I'll try. I'll remember.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's see. Last time we were together, we talked a little bit about TikTok. Now that you brought it up, it just came to mind. And we were talking about sort of the decision-making process that was leading to that vote to ban TikTok, as some people are saying. And there's some updates, right, since the last time we spoke. And we know that now TikTok will no longer be, it will still exist on people's phones and things for a time. But it looks like the requirement is really for TikTok to be sold to an American company. And there's been some concerns, right, since this vote has passed, some concerns from those of us who use the platform, concerns from parents, concerns from youth advocates, and of course, government officials. So it's been just really interesting. And I know that as we were preparing for this, Carlos, who is our producer, had shared some really great resources, and I had some time to really go through like all the pros and cons. And I think that's a really good process for any civic leader as you're listening to issues, is really to hear like what are all sides saying around this issue. But what I still sit with on this issue of TikTok is trying to figure out a way that we can still engage young advocates and youth in civil issues or civic issues, because I think what is the truth is that, or what can't be denied, is that there was so much advocacy, whether it was misinformation or whether it was correct information. It was, and it still continues to this moment. It's the space for young voices. And so I think what I'm sitting with is like, what is going to be the equivalent to that? Because there's not a lot that we can do about the sale, right? There's not a lot that we can do about the security piece. And so I think for me as a civic leader is trying to figure out like, how do we engage youth voters in an election year if TikTok is a platform that we won't be able to use at the same capacity, right? And I don't know where you sit with any of this, Melvette.
I understand how important it is to folks. I'm not on TikTok. Actually, I tried to get on TikTok and I forgot at one point to put in my date of birth, and then they banned me. I couldn't get back on. So I gave up. But I do know that it is important for young people especially. I know my daughter is all over TikTok. That's how she gets her news. And she's like, oh, weather, and she gets so much information from TikTok. I think what concerns me, are the security implications. So there are a lot of theories about that, and even some conspiracy theories about, well, why does the United States want to have all this information? Why don't, there's lots. I don't want to get into that. I think what I think might happen is that young people will create their own platforms. That's my hope and dream, that they create something for themselves. We have a lot of bright young minds out there, and I'm hoping that we see that young people, in the spirit of innovation and creativity, will create something that our government finds acceptable, and will allow them to use, so that they have those platforms to create, to be innovative, to use their voice, to share themselves, and to collaborate and work with one another. So I think that's my hope. But I know there are growing concerns, TikTok, and then what's going to happen, where, in spaces like Instagram and also with X, are we fair across all platforms? And of course, this is a foreign-owned company, and that's a big security concern. Let me get my words out. But I do think that we have to be fair across all platforms. And I do appreciate, as a person who works in government, right? I work in state government. I do appreciate that in most cases, legislators are trying to do the right thing, because they're people just like you and I, and they have children, they have families, and so they too see the implications of the concerns that arise from social media use, and whether it's mental health, whatever the things that we all hear about and experience, the addiction to social media, the images that people see, and sometimes young women and young boys and others aspire to, right? Like, well, I have to look like that person, I have to be like that person in order to be accepted. So those are the things I think that run through parents' minds. Parents are sometimes legislators as well, and they just want to protect their families, right? And so I think, like, in the broader scheme of things, we have to figure it out. We have to figure it out as a society, as those who are engaged in systems change, like, what is going to work? Because we know that social media does work for young people. It's how they choose to engage. And so
Right.
How can we support them? How can we support this next generation of leaders to create a platform that will work for them and work for the rest of us?
Yeah. I mean, I really would love to see the White House or, federal legislators to create these spaces for these conversations, right? I think, yes, it could be we also do our work as civic leaders, and young advocates should do the same. But it would be nice to see leaders within our federal government to create these spaces, to not wait till like the last minute, which is probably what's going to happen, right? A company might step up, or no one will step up to buy this platform. And then at the last minute, we're sort of scrambling for some replacement. And for me, I think the biggest concern is it's such a pivotal election year. And if this is where folks are going for information or for having the conversation, again, like the app isn't going away if you have it on your phone. But I think there won't be new like uploads or downloads of the app, or new updates and things like that. Eventually the app will just not be, functioning well. Right. And that will pose its own like security risks. But I think I am concerned with like, where will this conversation move to, in a year that's, it's just so important to have the right information and to have the conversation as we're looking at not just the presidential election, but other local and state elections.
So not only is the government trying to ban TikTok or a foreign entity for owning and operating it, but there's something else. And so I was reading this article. It's called "Can Government Coerce Removal of Content on Social Media?" And it was really about the Supreme Court taking up a case to decide whether the Biden administration's request to remove posts from social media platforms violated the First Amendment. And so this conversation around freedom of speech is going to continue to be a thread that we see as it relates to social media. I'm also wondering, in the back of my mind, for another conversation, how does that relate to AI as well, right? When people are sourcing using content. So anyway, but there's a case arising out of the government's influence on social media companies, right, to enforce content moderation policies, right? So they want to control the content that's being posted, and there's this case that's before the Supreme Court. They haven't decided it yet, but it's in the case Murphy versus Missouri. And so 5 users of social media platforms, as well as 2 states, Missouri and Louisiana, sued several federal agencies and officials for allegedly violating their First Amendment rights. And they were pressuring social media platforms to remove or deprioritize or add disinformation labels to their posts. And so these complaints were primarily about posts that were related to content concerning COVID-19, the pandemic, and the 2020 election. And so that case is going to be, I think, settled later this summer. I think that's the timing of it, but it does make one wonder how many more of these cases around social media, around freedom of speech, will we continue to see, and how will this all play out as we look at our court, and also future court appointments, I might add, as we are approaching elections in the fall, and we know that each candidate always, has their eyes on folks they would like to have seated on that Supreme Court. So these are all important things as we try to piece things together, all the puzzle pieces. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking specifically around our First Amendment, right? How this specifically it's really in the spotlight this year, right? We were talking about it with TikTok. We're talking about it around these cases.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this also with the protests that are happening around the country in colleges and universities. And I think it's a good time, as always, as civic leaders, to really sort through our feelings and our beliefs around what trumps the other thing. What's more important? Is it, this specific right to free speech? Is it community safety? Is it health? These are the things that we're always struggling with, and I imagine our legislators are struggling with. These are our rights guaranteed to us, but it's not without cost, right? And we definitely saw this early in 2020 and 2021 with so much misinformation and how that led to, death, right? It led to many of our communities being completely at risk. And what was more important? Was it important to have a say and to say whatever we believed, whether it was correct or not? Or is it the health of our communities? And I think we're seeing this again. What's more important, the safety of our youth and our communities, that they have the right, or that they have the right to say what they believe is right, especially when it concerns, the life of fellow humans in another country, right? As we're talking about Palestinian rights. But I think this is the thing that I'm really watching, is the conversation around this First Amendment right, and what we give up to keep, or what we give up to say what we need to say. It's an interesting time, I think, to be really involved right now. In regards to the protests, I know we on the team have really been watching, I think, both in horror and with so much empathy and sympathy for our youth leaders and for parents of, advocates in these university spaces. And there's a video that I watched, there was a protest at USC here in California, and there was a video I had watched with a dad who was being interviewed and asked like how he felt. Was he concerned for his daughter's life in these protests? And as a parent watching this Mexican dad say and declare like so proudly, right, that he was proud of his daughter, that, you know,
Right.
what she was marching for is, you know, really anti-genocide, right? It's for peace. And I really put myself in that place as I was hearing that, thinking of my own son who's 13. But, you know, I think to see your children begin to do their advocacy and speak out, would I feel the same? How would I feel if their health
Right.
is at risk? And how will my values also show up in his advocacy? And I really felt for that dad, thinking, yeah, I would be proud too if I've taught my children that, you know, peace is a value that we hold, right? Or that all humans are equal. If that's a value we hold, how is that going to show up in their advocacy? And I admired this father, right? Saying like, I would also be proud to be arrested alongside these students if that happened to me. But I think I really have been thinking a lot of the parents of these youth advocates and where they're sitting and what are the conversations they're having over dinner or on the phone in concern, right? Or are they expressing that they are proud of what young people are doing in this country? And that's regardless of what the argument is around this, right? Just thinking of like youth advocates in this moment in time. We haven't seen something
Right.
like this for a long time. You know, I think we saw like Black Lives Matter marches, but they were
Right.
not youth focused, right? These were full communities. And we're really seeing our youth lead this conversation and lead these protests specifically.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see our young people stepping up, and I'm going to retract that. I'm not going to say stepping up. I'm going to say doing what they do, right?
Mm,
Because it's
yeah.
almost as if they were in a position of inaction, and I think young people right now are in a space where they are acting, right? We don't always see it, but they are advocating, and in more and more spaces, we are seeing them live out their truths, and they're doing it unapologetically. So I don't want to say stepping up. I want to say doing what their hearts tell them to do. We might see it as stepping up, but I don't think they ever stood back from the challenges that are facing them. I think about my two daughters in particular, and they were some of the the young people who joined in with their neighbors and community members during those Black Lives Matter marches and protests, and I was so proud of them.
Yeah.
I did not. I chose not to march because we all have to know ourselves and know what we can engage in, and how that will affect us or even our employment. However, I do think that there was a sense of pride and also a sense of concern, just like this father that you were speaking about. I also have been watching the news and listening, and even recently, what happened down in New York with Columbia University, right? And there's this, we have to be so aware of what's happening, regardless of which side of the issue you're on. I think everyone has the right to peaceful protest. But I think what is happening, what's becoming more complicated, and what makes me more afraid for our young people in this time of protest and standing up, is that there are the people who are coming in as to disturb the process, right? So they're not really on the side of protest; they're coming in to make problem and trouble, and so that's what we saw down in Columbia University, where there was peaceful protests, they were encampments, but then there was a group of people who were not college students who had come from wherever, and now they have infiltrated the campus. They try to take over a building, and so I think that's what my concern is that in the midst of young people trying to stand up, or standing up and doing what's right for them, and using their voices and caring about their country and caring about how the United States is showing up in the world, there's always something on the other side of it trying to make it look different, and to disrupt that process. So I think that's what my concern is. But I would be with that dad. I would be so proud of my young person, standing up for what they believe in. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, what you were saying was about, you mentioned like being really aware, right, to what is happening. And I think as parents, the days are long, all of us are so busy, and it's so easy to disengage, but it is important to hear, like, what is the conversation out there? I do see a lot of misinformation around these protests, right? The conversation that's happening. And it's not to say that there might not be a few people that are saying like anti-Semitic remarks, but for the most part, what I've seen in communities around here, this is, a lot of these protests are about a government accountability. They're about, tax dollars being used a certain way. They're about, being pro-human life, right? And it's very easy to hear these other remarks about what this isn't. And I think as parents, whether it's this issue or anything, we have to be informed. And whether it's like a podcast or like a quick 10 minutes on NPR in the morning, whatever that source is for you as a parent, you can't tune out. Because this is where there's like disconnect, right? As young people are engaging in this conversation, as parents, we don't know what they're saying, right? Yes, let's ask questions, but I think we have to bring something to the conversation too, around like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what's going on. I've been having this conversation with my own son, like asking him, what have you heard? This is what I'm hearing. So we're having our own conversations around this issue and other civic issues, but we just can't tune out as busy as things get. And yes, our mental health matters, but we really have to hear both sides of the conversation to be fully informed leaders.
Yes, I think we have a clip of that video we want to play for people to see and to hear. Carlos, do you want to roll that for us?
They are threatening, if we don't leave the campus, we are going to be arrested. But the students are so brave. Look at them. They don't want to leave the campus.
Does that concern you, though, as a father, that your daughter is somewhere?
Even though it concerns me, but my daughter did a right decision. If she rather to be arrested fighting for Palestine, I will be the happiest daddy. I will be the happiest daddy if she's doing the right thing. And I know she's doing the right thing. If the police arrest me now, I am willing to go with the students. I have no problem, because what I am doing is the right thing, fighting against a genocide. I have kids, not only that in the years I have at 7 years old, and I imagine being a father in Palestine, to see my kid be assassinated by Israel. That's not good. We are humanity. This is not a matter of religion, political, no. We are as humans. We cannot support any genocide.
Wow. That's my first time seeing that clip.
Yeah, I've seen this several times, and it always makes me teary, especially where he says, at the end, like, I'm a parent of a 7-year-old, and to think of like other parents, right? Palestinian parents and their own children being murdered. And I think, again, we talk about parent leadership, and that is parent leadership, is to think of all of these different social issues through that lens, whether it's this specific war or it's, policies that, could uplift families in poverty. Like, what would that feel like for me as a parent? Those nights where I can't feed my child, and, or issues around like bullying or any other policy. What would it feel like as a parent if my family was going through this, if my child was going through this? That empathy is powerful. And we don't always do that, right? We think of like our ideals now, our values now, instead of like really thinking of like, what would that feel like for me? That like, that hopelessness, right? That your community isn't being helped. It's powerful. I think for me, the most powerful thing is like that empathy that this father shows in that moment.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And I just kept focusing on his words of, we're humans and this is about humanity. And again, people have their opinions on both sides of it, right? I also want to note that there are Jews, there are Israelis who don't want this, who don't want this to continue. And so it really, to me, no matter what side you're on, we all can come around and agree that the loss of life is terrible. And the loss of seeing babies and children on both sides die is not, it's not lost on me. And also, I would say that it's important that we continue to raise our voices around these issues and issues elsewhere in the world, right? Like if we look at the African continent, we look at the Congo, we look at what's happening in Sudan, all of these places, these things happen every single day to mothers, to children, to whole communities being wiped out. There's genocide in Africa and on the African continent that's happening. And so I think these issues are important right now. We know that this is a hot spot in the world, the Middle East. It always has been. I'm a woman of a certain age, and ever since I was young and could watch the news and read the newspaper, this is not a news story being told, right? And so we have to get to a point where we're actually doing something and we are valuing human beings' lives. And if I think we center ourselves in that, in the hope of acknowledging and understanding that people, like, we're all human beings, then maybe we can move towards something. But until we stop looking at land and ownership of things, it's going to be hard to do that around the world. And I think land has been an issue since the beginning of time. So I'll leave it there. But I wish I was able to meet that dad. I wish I watching that video, I just wanted to go and hug his neck and say, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. So much pride there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And I think what more could we want as parents for our children to live out the values that we've, brought them up with, and to do so bravely and fiercely. I think there are different ways to advocate, for sure. I think just to see your children speak up, I think that's always, feels good. Feels good as a parent.
Yeah. And a lot of times they learn that from us, from watching us in community, and we're their examples, and they watch us and like, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I can do that too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know that in my local community, I'm pretty public. I speak out quite a bit around like education issues. I've had my son there in the room with me or watching on Zoom. And usually before I go, I'll tell him, like, I'm going to go, I'm going to talk at the board meeting, or I'm going to mention your name, or today I talked about you, right? Like all of the advocacy I do with him in mind, even though he might not be impacted by the issue, it's him and the community that surrounds him, right? And that's really important for me to be able to show that. And this last month, I mean, May 1st today as we're meeting, but in April at the last board meeting, I talked about language justice. I've been advocating around language justice for my school community for a while. If you know me, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did this time is I gave my comment completely in Spanish and had no intent of translating it or wondered if they would interpret, right? Things are a little tense on the school board right now, but I gave my 3 minutes in Spanish as I was listing out what language justice would look like in the district, asking for an expansion of our interpretation and translation department. And I said, this day last year, I asked for these things and I'm back again, right? And when emails go unresponded or there's no action over like a year's time like this, for some of us, the only place is the public square. And so, I got on the agenda that way. And my comment was not interpreted. And then there was a Spanish-speaking parent after me that spoke on another issue, and they received interpretation. And there was a board member, right. There was a board member that then looked at her fellow board and looked at her board president and said, why didn't she, pointing to me in the audience, why didn't she get the same interpretation? I didn't understand anything of what she was saying. And so they had a debate from the board around who gets interpretation, who doesn't. They then asked me to send them the translated message. And it was just so interesting for me to watch. There are Spanish speaking folks in the audience. We had a good conversation around it after. And I went to a meeting yesterday, a school meeting on equity and anti-racism. And a few folks showed me from the district, look, I've been translating these things. I want you to know that we saw your comment. And someone else said, I want you to know, like, we had all these slides translated. We didn't know if there were going to be any Spanish speakers. And I just had that moment of like, it's working, right? Like no one told them to do it, right? This definitely wasn't a directive from the district, but people were watching. And this is why you engage in that space, right? And, someone said like, someday this won't be a thing we have to think about. It'll just be the culture, but like, thank you for doing that. Right. And
that's amazing.
It was so amazing though. But like for parents who are like pushing, I think it's important to say like, keep pushing. I always talk about like, I'm the pebble in like the shoes of these board members. I'm just going to keep bugging until they take off their shoe and they're like, fine, let's just do something about this, right?
Let's do it.
And like, I do it as lovingly as possible in the only way I can, but we can't give up, and this is still not what I've asked for, right? But I think little by little, those who are watching, the community will begin to shift this culture. But, again, like as soon as I heard that happen, I came home and I like told my kid, I was like, this is what I heard. Right. So like for him to see like the process, right. The progress. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I just can't get over the blatant disregard for like, here's this parent, and certainly they know you and they know like you become that parent, right. That they fear. That's the troublemaker or disruptor, right? So they're like, we know she knows how to speak English, right?
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to tell you, like, they were like, this is what they were thinking. I'm making a lot of assumptions, but I bet I'm pretty close. And the blatant disregard for not even like having what you said interpreted for others is so interesting, so interesting. But you did what you needed to do, and stuff is happening. I think also sometimes people just need to hear it because sometimes they don't know what they don't know, right? Like it's not as obvious to people what to do. I had a friend one time make an assumption that I knew how to do something. It's like, well, I thought everybody should just know how to do that. They felt like I wasn't showing up for them in a certain way and during a rough time. And I was like, I am not a mind reader, and I only can pull from my experience, and maybe what I need is not the same thing that you need. And so if you need something from me, just tell me, because I don't know what I don't know, right? Like, please don't make assumptions about what you think I know, right? And so I think that showed you that some of these people just needed to hear it, like, tell us what to do and we'll do our best, right, to do it. And then there are the others that are like, I still don't care, right? Right? And those are the folks that are going to have to change hearts and minds if they really want to help children and to be the educators and the administrators that we need for our communities. That's so interesting. And that was during public comment at a Board of Ed meeting, a school board meeting.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still getting there. We're getting there. We'll get there eventually. So, I wonder, I'm not sure how many school board meetings are left in the school year, but I know that, we're not quite there. Some parts of the country, they're moving along to the close. I'm pretty sure in the South, May is kind of like we're out of school almost. and then maybe in other parts of the country. I wonder, what are the conversations that parents are having, right, with their children, with the teachers, with the administrators. I remember something I used to do, and this is probably bored. I would love to hear your ideas on it, but I came to know after many years, so I have 4 children, they're all adults now, but I've been around the block a few times with teachers. You can imagine how many teachers we had and all the things. And you buy teacher gifts and they get mugs, and you give them a gift card, or your kid makes them flowers, whatever. There's lots of things that I've seen happen over the years. But one thing I started doing, because I asked the principal one time, I said, I want to do something for the teachers, but I want to do something different, because I'm pretty sure they're tired of all these mugs that we're giving them. How many mugs can they have? And this was an elementary school principal. And she said to me, write them a letter. Write a letter. Thank them. She said, or even write a letter and give me a copy, so that they know that their boss is seeing what you're saying, the good about them, and how their interaction with their child might have helped or changed their life. And so that's what I started doing with all the teachers. I would write them letters at the end of the school year and thank them, and go back and think about some of the things that I know happened for my child because that teacher did it, right? Because they were patient, and they were patient in a way that helped my child to blossom in this area. Or, some of the little idiosyncrasies our children have, like, I know they like to tap their foot. Thank you for your patience, helping us have strategies that, And I'm going to tell you, one of the teachers, I'm going to tell you, not one of them did not like the letters. I never heard a teacher say, I wish you had given me a gift card. They all liked the letters. And then when my oldest son graduated from high school, I wrote letters to all the teachers I could remember. And I told them they all had a hand in helping him to graduate, right? I wrote it to the principals. I was just writing letters. And then I stopped writing the letters when the other kids got older. I just did cards, like, thank you for helping them achieve this, right? I think that's just something to do. That's a conversation that I like to have with parents, like, and I think there are different conversations that might be happening. There might be conversations around, hey, can I give you some feedback as a teacher? Right? Because sometimes it becomes combative, where we're like, you're just not responding to my child's needs, but maybe on the way out, you give them something, right? Like, hey, here's a thank you. One thing I like that you did, one thing I would do different to the teachers. What other kinds of conversations do you think are happening, or during this end of the school year time, or what kind of conversations should be happening?
Yeah, I mean, this is also testing time, right, for a lot of our school districts. And I think this is a good time for mental health conversations with administrators. And certainly this is a conversation that we have had as parents of a student that's about to go through testing. This reminder of, like, those tests do not define you. These tests are about how they're teaching you, but it has nothing to do with you, whether you do well or you don't do well. It has no bearing on how we see you, right? We love you,
right?
Don't stress, all of these things. And I think I'm finally starting to see schools communicate the same thing. We had a letter from our principal that said almost the same type of message, right? To talk to our students and to let them know that, if they need certain, like, strategies to get ready, but that this isn't the most important thing. And I really appreciated that, because that is a philosophy that I hold around tests specifically. They're only meant for certain type of students, and it has nothing to do with really tracking proficiency. So, we've had those conversations, but I'm glad to see administrators are having those conversations.
That's awesome.
And really the mental health for our teachers and staff also. People don't talk about, like, how students right now are also, like, all over the place emotionally as they're closing out the year. that has an impact on classroom environment. That has an impact on teachers who have done really well all year, but now students are just like, kids are just everywhere emotionally, right? It's like a roller coaster these last couple of months. And I think, you know, we have to be really extra thankful and grateful that teachers are holding it together and staff are holding it together. And so I think that's one of the things I try to communicate. And I haven't done the letters. I love the letters idea. I think that's something I'm going to try doing this year. What we usually do is I talk to Logan, like, who is a teacher, or who are the teachers that made a difference for you? And let's get something together, right? Whether it's like one chocolate bar, because it's like his teacher's favorite chocolate bar is Snickers, right? But that it's something from him, and that he really thinks intentionally, right, about what his teachers have done.
I love that.
I'm just going to go kind of dark, so I'm sorry if I'm going to go there, but one of the recent conversations I had with a former teacher, now retired, that has made me really think of teachers differently since we had this conversation almost a month ago, was, you know, as we begin the year again, you know, we were talking about sort of like August when we go back, we were sharing how we always have the active shooter conversation as a family. And she shared how that's a conversation that teachers have amongst themselves, and that the unspoken thing, though, in those conversations is this expectation that teachers are the protectors of our children, right? That their bodies are meant for not just teaching our children, but their bodies are meant to protect the lives of our children.
Wow.
And I had never really thought of it. I've never heard that from a teacher, first of all. And it made me appreciate them in such a different way, because she's right. We don't talk about the expectation that they need to protect our children, right? And so I have felt so much gratitude for our educators, because it's not just that they're educating our students, but they go in there knowing every school year that when the worst happens, right, they are meant to guard our children. And I think as I'm going into like Teacher Appreciation Week this month, it's a heavier feeling for me. It's not just, you know, yes, they're there to teach my children, but it's also an appreciation that they're every day putting their life on the line for our kids, because that's America today, right? Unfortunately, that is America today. So yeah, I'm definitely feeling something different this year as I go into this appreciation space.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't have children in schools, you know, K through 12 anymore, so that's not so apparent for me in that way. What I can tell you, as I got chills as you were sharing that, there are two things. So one, anytime we have this conversation, I can't not say this person's name, because I like to honor her life every time I can. And so I'm going to speak the name of Lauren Russo, who was a teacher who was killed in Sandy Hook, who I knew well, who was a beautiful human being, and her dream was to be a teacher. I met her when she was a barista at Starbucks. And I remember when she was in school, and I remember when she finally got that assignment to go be a teacher in school. And so I'm just going to say her name and honor her, because she did put her life on the line for children. And we don't think about that often enough, that that they're there to teach, but they're also there to protect as well. And we don't see them as a first responder.
That's right. At
all. We don't see them as we see police officers who are protecting and serving. And so I'm so appreciative of you bringing that today. And I hope that when others hear this podcast, that they're able to think a little differently about teachers as well. Yeah, I think that's all. I was going to say something else. I think that's it. I'm just going to leave it right there.
Yeah. And I think as we're like ending the close of our time, we can definitely end this in like a celebratory, like, yes, let's celebrate teachers.
Yes.
And I know it just got a little like heavy.
It's okay. It's real. This is real.
But it's also like a time of celebration, right, Melvette? Like, what are the things that we celebrate around this season?
It is. So I'm just pulling it out there. So I do have loved ones who work in schools. My daughter in love is a teacher, and I know she's always so excited at the end of the year, right? Looking at her students and how they're progressing, and a lot of stuff is confidential. She doesn't share that, but she just has such joy in the work. But there are lots of folks out there who are graduating, both students who are, graduating, but also just moving up to the next grade. And there are a lot of parents who are graduating too, who are going through their own journey of, completing school or getting a certification, or even embarking on a new dream like entrepreneurship. Like, there are people who are making a decision now that my child has graduated high school and they're in college, or maybe my college student is off on, I'm going to now pick up the dream that I wanted. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to do a new thing. I'm going to be a social influencer, whatever it is. I think that in this season of spring, of new life that springs forth as we look around, I think that there are a lot of things that we should be celebrating about how parents are moving up and doing things as well as their kids. I don't know.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I'm also celebrating parents who, through these last 12 years or more, right, of public school, and let's add like preschool and all of that, that you've like made it, and wherever your kiddo goes next, right? There's always like this conversation. There's that question, like, what's happening next? Where's your kid going next? Can we just like celebrate that we have made it, right, to this moment, in whatever capacity, we have like brought our children to like this finish line. And I think sometimes as parents, you just need to sort of like take that in and like appreciate all of that hard work that parents put in, and that our young ones put in also. It's not just parents. And of course we do this with the help of like counselors and teachers. But I think if you're a parent that is here and your child is graduating high school or college, like, celebrate yourself. Just take a moment, whatever that means for you. But I'm celebrating parents who have made it to like high school graduations right now.
Yes. I mean, because let's just be clear, the graduation is about the student, but it really is about that parent. It's about us too. It's about us.
Yeah.
It's about us.
For sure.
Yeah. So we're in May now. So we're like, what's next? What's coming up?
Yeah, I think, you and I are traveling for different things. We want to hear about your new job for the next podcast so that we can make that like a little bit more official. But I think there'll be some things, right? We're taking parents to DC in May, so I want to be able to talk about like that experience. But I just want to say thank you, Melvette, for this like wonderful conversation, for letting me go all over the place with it. I always appreciate talking to you.
I love our time together, where we could just chop it up. Absolutely. Yes. Well, until next time.
All right. Till next time.